doing it? Sorry, we'll get slicker. Yeah, it appears to be doing it. What I'm also going to do is start recording on it just in case that doesn't work.
No, it's going. It's happening.
Yeah, cool. Worked.
I can see it.
All right. Hi, Troy. How are you doing?
You all right? How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. I had Big D yesterday. It was Remembrance Sunday. So full kilt up at the cenotaph, doing all the things we should be doing. And then had a family meal, which was raucous and quite fun. Right, what I'd like to do, unless anyone's got anything else they want to go through, is bring Troy up to speed with the contents of the last conversation. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the YouTube stream of that.
Yeah.
I've updated the table that Troy, you and I started to try and make sure that because there's a couple of things. The first one is there was a couple of concepts that we were mismatched with, which I think we're in line with now. I would just want to make sure we've got that nailed. And the second thing is the language, because we were quite sloppy on the language in some places, and that caused, it looked like we were drifting, but in fact we weren't really, but there were a couple of things we need to change. So I'm referring to page 1, the table on page 1, and continues on page 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would suggest making this its own page.
Sorry, say that again?
I would suggest just making this its own page, so like just...
Oh, yeah. Feel free. Go ahead. And these are for notes. This is not for the DPL. This is just so that we're talking about the right stuff. So the in terms of the biggest change of material stuff as opposed to definitions, the material stuff is, remember last time, Troy, I was talking about going through the example contracts. It was necessary to have a licensor in order to grant any kind of license to anything else. So you had to earth it. And what Tom was pointing out, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is no licensor. So what we're doing is this is a pro forma contract that if you're signed up with, there needs to be a clause saying anyone signed up with the DPL and interacting with another person who's also signed up to the DPL agrees to the details of the DPL. So those signatories don't need a licensor. So we're not passing on any rights. What we're doing is we're providing a framework where any two people can decide on this DPL, and if they both signed it, the other can be confident that they're going to be held by the agreement inside the DPL. And that's quite a major one. And that's one thing I'm struggling with, because there's no contracts I could find that do something similar. It's other than
except contracts, third-party contracts, right?
Third-party contracts, yeah, other than, template contracts, but that's still
I'm
one-to-one.
saying, like, if you and I were entered a contract agreement between each other, that would be the same sort of dream catcher.
Exactly. That's the outcome.
So that's what I mean by third-party. I mean, there's no lawyers involved, there's no corporations, there's no... It's just a verbal handshake, if you will, with some sort of signature hash that says that we both agree to these particular standards of doing business.
Yes. And on the table, that's 3 up from the bottom. So,
but that's not between the two of you directly. It's, I think the term you used, Troy, was a single party contract. It's not. It doesn't name the two parties directly. They're just signing this contract, presenting it to each other so that the other can use it with force.
That's right. And the way you'd ensure that, if you wanted to print it out and take it to a lawyer, you'd have to print out both ones saying you've signed up to this DPL, and in that DPL saying if you're interacting with another person who signed up to that DPL, the DPL is enforced between the two. So you don't need one-to-one contracts everywhere. What you need is a one to everyone else on the DPL contract on one side, and a one to everyone else on the DPL contract.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hoping we can achieve here. Yeah. That is exactly what I'm hoping we can achieve here. And the mental model I have is that it's kind of like the DPL is like a contract that you found on the internet, and you downloaded it, filled in your name, and then you signed it. So it's not like it's between, say, the Dreamcatcher DAO or Dreamcatcher Inc. or anything like that. It's not between anyone. It's just here's a template invoice, contract. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Which will have implications, Troy, when we later on talk about jurisdiction and so on. Because anyone in any jurisdiction can effectively form a contract between anyone else in any jurisdiction. And then if it comes to breach, we need to put in wording there about how they decide the jurisdiction. And I'll remember this is after arbitration, because both are agreeing that the first step is arbitration. But what we can't do is say that the laws of the world, are not available to them. So the going up from the bottom, and this was more of a terminology thing that Tom and I were kind of talking through the last call. The self-hosted, Anarchy self-hosted, there's nothing stopping, well, actually we're encouraging people to just download this and run a copy of the Dreamcatcher and being able to access any other instance depending on the ACL. So someone could, say any self-hosted can interact with me, that's fine. Or more interestingly, probably set it up inside of a company, perhaps between two companies, two instances. That's their own business. There's no agreement there. There's nothing we can say about it. In fact, until they actually interact with anything that we have visibility of, we don't even have visibility of it. So there's no way around that, and actually there shouldn't be. It's an entire. I put it down as Anarchy self-hosted as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, but that it's up to them. They can do anything. The next level up, we stumbled over the idea of an account, but got to the bottom of it. Actually, the description of account is wrong in this case, so we're now talking about Anarchy hosted. The account is actually with the hoster. So this is someone who's decided to set up their own set of instances and then sell access to those instances that they're hosting to others. And the interaction between them, again, is no business to us. Perhaps they have their own end user agreement or whatever, but this is not a DPL thing. Both the bottom one and the one up simply gives access. So you're now on, you can interact with any other instance that has the right ACL that lets you in, but you can crack on without any kind of contractual obligation around the DPL. Before I move on, so those bottom two are like that's the bootstrap. How do you get onto it at all? This is prior to any kind of agreement between people actually doing work on it. So any questions around that? And Tom, do you agree with what I've said up to this point? Because it's important.
I agree with what you said. Those are my aspirations for the DPL.
Yeah, cool. One level up, I'm now looking at 3 up, the DPL self-identification step.
Is Troy still with us? Or is he...
I think so. Yeah, he's here.
I'm just listening.
Yeah.
I mean, did you want me to say something?
Yeah, every 2 minutes, can you do a ping noise, please?
Scott is just explaining the levels to me. That's all. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand what he thinks about it. Is all.
Yeah, no, let's go. Yeah. Just make a ping noise every 2 minutes. That'd be handy.
Or burp. Just burp.
A burp. Yeah.
I just do have a comment about the first party thing, because I made that statement because if I'm a DPL licensee and I sign up to the DPL, then I've kind of pinged the network, for lack of a better term, that I am kind of ready to do business.
Yes.
So that is a first party contract. It would be like me recording the conversation, like I explained before. Like if I have a contract that says I'm allowed to record conversations to anybody who talks to me, then and to be able to talk to me, you have to agree to it by even showing up. That would be a first party recording.
I like that.
Because you don't have to have both people's agreement in order to have this conversation. Because by showing up and being here, you've already agreed to have your voice recorded by this first party person.
That's right.
And that's kind of how.
And the only verification and confidence building that you need is to be able to check that the other person has self-identified that they're signing this DPL, and you can check it's the same DPL that you've signed. And if it is, then crack on. You both know what the common terms that you're using and the common rights and responsibilities that you're being held to.
Yeah, but that's just for the atomic version of the contract, whereas the most basic of basic versions, which is the line that you're up to right now.
Right, exactly. So this is effectively a self-cert. So a signature is a self-cert. It's not being notified.
Hang on. The most atomic version of the contract, there's only one version of the contract in my mind. We talking about other ones.
There wouldn't be one version. There can't be one version. There has to be one. There has to be the atomic version that everybody agrees to is the most fundamental version of the license, and then there's a version where people will be able to strap on modules.
Yes, the modular thing.
Right. Those modules are what we hope will be electronically added. This is the minimum version required to allow you to escalate up to using electronic modules.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So let me give the example in my mind, and hopefully. Okay. So me and you signed the DPL, and we're doing basic business on Dreamcatcher.
Yep.
But then I need you to sign an NDA, right? Specifically between you and me. So I put the NDA module on the contract, and we both signed that. That's something I could print out and take to the attorney that says that not only did I have a DPL, but I had a specific clause in this DPL that allowed me to have an NDA with this particular person.
So let me check that the model's the same. With that NDA clause would have been agreed to digitally, not in paper, not using conventional means.
Correct. But I'm just saying that, but the module, let's say I add the DPL module into my electronic license, I need that to be able to kind of like seamlessly go onto a printable contract that I can print out and sign and take to a lawyer, or maybe another DPL person who wants that NDA also wants an actual signature scanned or something like that. I don't know.
Right. Or if arbitration fails and you need to invoke the courts, it would be possible to print out the module plus the DPL as a single document
it would look like a seamless license.
Yeah, cool. Because the whole point of this is to avoid having paper contracts.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying think of this as a smart contract, but it's mutable, but immutable once you've actually added something to it. Like, so you can upgrade it, but once you've upgraded it, you can't take that away.
You can't downgrade it, yes.
So that's the way, in my mind, I'm seeing this as a smart contract for license.
Right. So as the workflow for DPL escalation, where the purpose is to get from one-time paper to n times electronic, I believe that the clauses for NDA should be down at the root, at the base of the paper version, because that seems like the minimum that you'd need in there.
Not necessarily. I could see a bunch of situations where I wouldn't need an NDA to do business with somebody else on the network, but I would want the other person on that. But I do want them to have a DPL for verification and just trustless sort of situations.
So what features would you be getting what's examples of features you'd be getting out of the DPL in that case?
The fact that they're verified, and maybe they're KYC'd, and maybe they have a certain reputation on the network.
So you would be saying that you will only trade with that person if they have signed the DPL and have escalated up using one of the electronic modules to pass a verification such as a pass.
I'm just saying that maybe at the basic level, I only want to do business with people who've actually signed the atomic version of the contract. But maybe later on, I want to escalate that to where maybe I'm only doing business with people who signed that contract plus an NDA with me specifically. Maybe I escalate to after that person not just sign the NDA, but I need KYC for something.
Yeah, okay, all right, cool. So I guess now that you put it like that, the only reason I'm talking about the NDA piece being required to be in there is that some types of restriction or contractual obligation need to be grounded in the paper version for you to have any derivative of that in the electronic version. That's what I was getting at more. Not that I necessarily want the NDA in the paper version, but I do want it to allow you to commit to arbitrary NDAs higher up the chain. Maybe it turns out we don't need that in paper.
I mean, I think an NDA would definitely be a paper thing at some point. I'm pretty sure people are going to want to see a paper signature somewhere.
It's just an interesting example, isn't it? So What we're trying to do is to provide a pro forma contract that people independently who don't know each other can both sign up, and then some future point do business together, knowing that that's in force. And if we're to
we're trying to develop a smart license.
right,
Really.
right, yeah.
Right.
But
exactly. Modular smart license.
Exactly.
That's
but
right.
the question is the modules also need to follow the same format, don't they? Or they should, if we can follow the same format. So, for example, if you were to have two people saying, okay, we both signed the DPL and we want an NDA, that NDA should be of kind of fractal shape, exactly like the DPL. So one way to do that, for example, would be if you have a project and you wrap some information around it saying the ACL is only going to let you see this if you have agreed the NDA that this is broadcasting. Because otherwise we're going to end up with a whole bunch of end-to-end NDAs, and we'll kind of lose the value of it. The whole point is to avoid having to agree an NDA or agree any of these modules. What you want to do is broadcast what the requirements that you have to anyone actually seeing this information.
I see what you're meaning. I'm also starting to see that perhaps these electronic versions would become, like certain ones would become popular. So maybe you'll sign up to the something NDA version 0.5, and that becomes popular, and everyone's signing up to that. And then someone else makes a different form, like Troy's NDA and version 0.1, and then someone else can work out the compatibility between the two. So you can say, like, I will Troy NDA greater than 0.1 or Scott NDA greater than 0.5.
Right.
Is this the kind of like because we've given people the option to reuse proven, tested, popular NDAs, I imagine we should trust, I think, that the market, or not the market, Troy hates that word, the masses will converge on the lowest burden and the most popular and the most tested in actual combat.
Right, exactly. And so if we hold by the idea that in order to be held by a contract, all you got to do is you read that contract, that NDA, whatever the modules are, all the modules that may be provided, and then you add that into your in your person goes saying, these are the contracts I'm willing to be held by. Someone else does that, and then it's a matching thing. It's like, okay, right, you both agreed that anyone approaching you will be held under this NDA. If you get a match, then that's the one that's in force.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, because then we avoid, in terms of the modules. Yeah.
I mean, Tom can speak to the practicality, but I mean, this sounds to me like we have the root contract, if you will, and then you have certain modules that become like children or inherited or even imported into that root contract, depending on how it is you want to apply this smart license.
Yeah, and then it starts to, when you unroll it, it looks like paragraphs and sub-paragraphs that can print out in a linear contract that you can take to a lawyer on paper, because each of the electronic modules had a corresponding legalese
print function in there somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Good. Okay. So
and then we can actually set up the priority on. I mean, we'll set up the base priority. I'm sure that can be muted later, but I'm just saying that maybe we set up like, well, the core contract always prints first, and then any subsequent modules.
Yeah, like rules around the modularity where the interfaces between the modules are, so that it still holds up in court, and some judge isn't like,
why is the NDA here, and like what's going on there, and then this clause doesn't.
And then you got a big bill. Yeah, I'm sure that the lawyers will be happy with that, but there'll be a massive bill.
Right, but I guess the energy difference that we're trying to capture here is the fact that it should be radically less effort to use this system than a paper one. And so I would like to imagine that it will, people will prefer to do the electronic ones, and they'll prefer to standardize because there's a gain for them to do so.
Well, we already know that happens, Tom. We've already seen that already. That's happened already with smart contracts. Is anybody in their life going to print out a smart contract and take that to a lawyer?
No, but they might be asked by the boss, could you?
Yeah, it's just not going to.
I mean, when we're talking about printing a contract, we're talking about hand-holding until people get more comfortable with a smart license.
Right.
That's all we're saying.
Right. Yeah, it's your CEO, has asked you, okay, so all this stuff is happening, but I want the lawyers to have a look over it. What are you going to do? You can't point them at, any kind of logic. You can't point them in any kind of system. They're going to want
Any
something.
kind of logic, blatant insult to the whole industry. Yeah.
It's true.
Now,
Yeah.
one question I do have about this in your mind, Tom, before you leave. Now, when we talk about interfacing with other people on the network, are we talking about sort of a pull or a push request or a call where it's like, I want to call this person so that our contracts sync up and we can start doing business? Is that what you have in your head?
The model of the chains is that you're able to. They have a broadcast function, so you can either broadcast to make it public that you are open for business with this version of the DPL with these modules attached to it, or you can make a direct connection through maybe there's a group that you join, like the Dead Poets Society or something, and you agree to publicize within that closed group, or advertise is a better word, advertise what your current DPL status is and what you've signed up to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's logically very similar to, it's quite old now, but it's service-oriented architecture, isn't it? You set up your service and you advertise the terms.
So like a SOAP service you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And this is the publication of advertising that I can interact in these ways. And there's always like an inbox for every person where you can, under certain conditions, receive requests for you to alter what you're advertising.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. How much time you've got, Tom? There's one question that when I was going through this, I've not got in my
3
head.
minutes.
Is there any? I did mention it yesterday, but in the recording, I didn't really get to the ground of it. If anyone, the DPL is not enforceable. There's nothing behind it. It's just an agreement that two people signed the DPL. That means that the DPL doesn't have any particular priority over, an LDP written by someone backwards. There's no particular priority for people. If they were to sign up to any two things, as long as they both signed up, that's enforced. So there's
Are you saying that they may sign something in the future that may nullify their commitments to the DPL?
Very, very possibly. In fact, it's an open book. They could sign.
So you need a clause in there that's enduring. Like you can make enduring contracts that can't be undone by a later clause of some sort. And at the very least, the courts would expect you to have notified people that are of concern if you signed your way out of a contract.
Right. Yes, that answers some part of it. But say if someone gets self-hosts and then advertises their own version of DPL, let's call Anarchy DPL, they don't really care. So long as someone else has got an Anarchy DPL also advertised, those two can do business on the basis of that Anarchy DPL. And we have no sight of that.
It's more free than that. Anyone can do business with them. They just published a modified version of a forked open source package in equivalence, and they can, if other people trust them, fine. If it becomes popular, we should pay attention. Maybe it's better. I don't know.
Yeah, good.
It's the whole point of the system is it's free choice. It's free choice to choose who you will interact with and to choose what features you need them to have committed to, if any at all, for you to begin. But this is primarily there for those who want to do some serious business that do actually require a bit of muscle behind the commitments that they're making to each other, because that's how the majority of business happens.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's exactly what I was thinking, because there's no priority over the DPL. All we're doing is putting that DPL up there as a necessary utility for you to do business on this. There may well be many versions of the DPL ultimately, but the important thing is this kind of matching of the advertising of the contract services that you're happy to interact with others on.
Yeah. API compatibility, and it does not have to be 100%.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I gotta run.
Yeah, no.
I'll keep watching on the.
You're not sorry. Bye.
Yeah. You just see it on YouTube.
On the television. It'll be fun. Yes.
He was sitting there swearing at your TV.
Yeah.
No, that's not right.
Yeah, I'll see you later.
All right, come on. Right, can you give
All
me...
right, see you on TV.
Say again, sorry?
I said, see you on TV, Tom.
Right, give me 1 minute. I'm doing my usual daily, making sure that the girl's actually gone out this door. I'll be right back.
Yep.
Ah, perfect. She's actually gone. Brilliant. Happy days. No shouting. You still there?
Yep.
Yep. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
No, this there's a useful conversation on Saturday with Tom, because again, and this is my bugbear, and my banner that I've been waving for a long time is the requirement for very tight definitions. So Tom was worried that we were drifting, and we had drifted in a couple points, but not significantly. But mostly it was down to the definitions. The dictionary is a hugely important piece. So now I can continue up through this if that would be helpful. But it's let's do that. So I'm now on fourth up. So identification through a third-party assertion, and this is much like a notary saying, okay, so you've signed the DPL and you put some evidence to say that you're actually this legal entity. So you effectively have an attack service if someone goes through the courts for you. That third-party service is none of our business, and it's down to any user who wants to put up a notary service to do so, and their reputation is their own reputation. Their agreement and their SOPs for doing so is their business, and people can assess. That third party is the step up from signature. So signature, when you're talking about two people signing without even knowing each other, the signature is just saying, yes, this is self-certification. One step up, the notary is just another person saying, yeah, okay, I've checked, and the evidence that this person has presented that actually signed is true. So it's one level of confidence up. But the important thing is it's no business of the DPL. Likewise, the document identification service. So now we're talking about sending in photographs of your passport, say. Perhaps that's required for some services that are set up. Again, no business of ours. That service can be set up by anyone. How they do that is up to them. And how much weight is given by the fact that they've notarized or checked the passport of this person is down to the observer who's looking at that and saying, okay, well, these guys, the passport checking service seems pretty good. They've got a good reputation, so I'm going to give that some credence. And the final one, the KYU.
Well, I'll just make one comment here. I'm not sure if it's applicable yet or not, but in terms of data privacy and, I don't know, storage, I guess. Data storage is even the right term for this. But let's say somebody sets up a shingle and wants to do identification services on Dreamcatcher, and everything's going really, really swimmingly, and everything's going really, really well. But for whatever reason, there's some sort of breach in their server on Dreamcatcher. I don't know how this works. It may not even be happening in real life the way it's set up. I don't know. But is there some sort of standard that the DAO would have to impose on critical to function type services like this to have a minimum security aspect and reduce their threat surface so that if stuff like that happens, it doesn't come back on the Dreamcatcher DAO itself.
No, although there's two parts to the answer. The first one, there's nothing stopping a trusted party, for example, the DAO, putting forward guidelines saying, in terms of data protection and privacy, here's what you should be doing. But there's no compulsion. There's no method to compel.
I know. I'm just saying that it's like, here's the data protection best practices, and if you do not follow this, we don't take any responsibility for what you're doing, and we can't give you any sort of verification for that. So
yes.
if you don't follow a minimum standard, of data protection, then
that can be stated, but I don't think there's any implied responsibility on any one part of the Dreamcatcher over any other part. So you could say that here's a bunch of guidelines, and if you don't follow that, you can't come against us. Anyone could state that.
I guess. Okay, so what I'm saying is okay. So let's say the DAO would set up certain principles for data protection for critical features like this. I would think I would put my hand up and vote for the DAO to put like that. Anybody claiming to do identification would have to at least done KYC with the DAO. You know what I mean? Like if you're gonna stick your hand up and say, I'm gonna do this sort of critical stuff on this blockchain mainnet, then you have to at least gone to this threshold of this license before you can even think about doing something.
No, but the reason I say no is quite subtle. So by analogy, there's no DAO over seeing what people put on websites, and the person putting on the website may be completely anonymous or may be very verifiable in terms of how they set that up. If they breach data privacy laws, then they're the attack surface. There is no overarching organization that you could go to, say in the internet, saying this website has breached data privacy laws. It's down to the person who set that up, and it's a similar situation. If you've got an instance and the change that you're doing, you're hosting, breaches law, then that's your lookout, and the effectiveness of law enforcement going after that person really comes down to how well you've verified, what your what the confidence is that you're a real person. But if they're completely anonymous, good luck to them. It's there's no overarching organization which dictates down. Which is
but I mean we've already stated in this license already that you're not allowed to break laws in your own country, right?
Yes, but remember this is not this is a pro forma that two people agree with, and so what they're doing is they're both agreeing that they're not breaking laws in their own country. There's no third party overseeing this, and this was the kind of the core of the conversation I had with Tom on Saturday.
No, but that's my point. So if I'm signing up and to a point where a level where I'm not only am I confident of signing this and saying that I am not going to break laws in my own country applicable to the Dreamcatcher, I'm also getting KYC and other verification things. So therefore, I'm at a privileged status or role or authority in this space, right?
Yep.
That's what we're saying, right?
Yep.
Okay, so since I've said I'm going to be a good boy and do all this other stuff, and I dox myself, so to speak, as a privileged authority on this mainnet, I should have privileged access to do certain services. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. Yeah.
Whether that be aspect, I don't know what that would look like, but I mean, like you put up the analogy of child pornography and other stuff. Like who goes through and clicks all that and sends it to the proper authorities? Is that just somebody we're just going to let do that willy nilly, or is that somebody? Or people are going to look to us as the creators for some sort of guidance as to what they're supposed to be doing or how to handle this sort of situation?
Oh, so just to make sure I've got this to reflect back, is like what guidance is beholden to effectively the first on the net, the first on the Dreamcatcher. What guidance is beholden to us to provide to others to make sure that a good actor doesn't accidentally fall foul, because you don't want to have to work out for yourself. You might miss things. Some things might be really obvious. It's also available to you to completely ignore them, but the guidance is there. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So what I'm saying is that, okay, since we're the pioneers and we're going to have the arrows all over us, we have to set the example, right, and the standard and the good practices for doing business on this. And if we don't set the right example or make it easy enough to follow the right example, then we could end up with a
I agree.
Dark web really quickly.
I agree completely. There's no, as with all guidelines, there's no enforcement next to that, other than if the guidance is well constructed. If law enforcement look at that and saying, well, the community has generally agreed to this guidance and this person is well off, as well as being illegal, then that adds weight to prosecution of that person. But there's no. I think you're about 6-7 minutes ago. You're saying, is there anything that we need to say? The last clause saying, if you don't follow this, you can't come against us. I don't think we need that, because we'd be in your suggestion publishing guidance only and saying, "Look, guys, here's what we think is the right thing to comply with the spirit of the law. However, you need to look at your own jurisdiction. If you really want to be a good actor, you need to satisfy yourself. But here's a pro forma. We're going to help you. It's going to be helpful for it. But there's no attack surface to get at, because we have no. The DAO is no particular privileged position inside of the Dreamcatcher because of the method of it. In the same way as there's ICANN doesn't have a privileged position other than its reputation over the internet. Similar to that.
Well, they do, though. They have the keys, literally. They literally have keys.
Right. So that aside. But you know what I'm saying is there's a privileged position because you're first and because you have the authority and the reputation, but there's no enforcement. There's no possible. We can't throw people off this by the very structure of it. Someone could spin up their own instance.
Oh no, I'm not saying about throwing people off, but we can make them persona non grata, right? I mean,
right, exactly, and that comes down to recording faithfully. And this is the transparency thing. Recording faithfully. What we could do, record faithfully whether they've abided by the guidelines or not. And it's like, you have not abided by the guidelines. It's there for all to see. On the child porn thing, Tom's got a great idea of scanning occasionally through assets for the library of hashes. Apparently, I didn't know this. Apparently, the FBI have got this massive library of known images, and they've hashed each, and they make the hashes available. We can scan through those, and again, if you find an asset out there, we could post a reputation report against one person saying you've got a hash of this kiddie porn thing. But that's as far as it goes, and we're not beholden to do that. It's just it will be a good community building thing to do, right? Because you're saying, well, what steps are you taking so that people are not being,
it's not just hashing existing images from the FBI database, but it's also they also have community services that take pictures of hotels.
Take what? Pictures of hotels?
The pictures of hotel rooms.
Huh.
So the idea of the hotel room pictures is that
for identification location. Oh, right. That's quite smart. Didn't know that.
So when you go on vacation, you should take pictures of your hotel room and you send it to this database and you say what hotel it was and what room number you're in and all this other stuff. And
that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and they use it to track down people that do all kinds of shady shit like this.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Huh. There you go. But yeah, did that answer your question on the guidelines? So yes, on the guidelines, no, we don't. I think need to specifically state if you don't follow these, you can't come after us, because we have no legal binding to whatever you do when you spin up your instance on your laptop using the open source code of Dreamcatcher and then connect to other instances. We might not even necessarily have sight.
Well, I mean, yes, we don't have access to what I would consider the dark web of Dreamcatcher, but we do have responsibilities in certain enable rights, if you will, as a DAO for people who are on the surface web of the Dreamcatcher and who are doing KYU and all these other things.
Yeah, exactly. What we can do is provide a certification service, which is based on the DAO's reputation, based on guidelines that are published. And then if people want to say, we agree with these guidelines, can you certify us? Then we can put that into their reputation, and everyone can see, Dreamcatcher DAO has said you're good on kiddie porn, for example.
That's a good thing to have, but okay.
Yeah, or data privacy is probably a more mainstream one, right? But that's
this person does not have any hashes in his
exactly.
Like, wait, what? Why are we looking at that?
Why did you ask? It's like you protest too much.
That raises more questions.
It's like putting out a public statement. So I have no explosive devices in my house whatsoever. It's like,
yeah, okay. So who's asking exactly?
Okay, good. And just to round off that table, the last one, I think you see the pattern here. The KYU or the KYC we were previously talking about, which again, I've very much would like to kind of, and definition-wise, ring fence that around the legal definition of the FAFT. That's the legal definition of it, and the only reason that you'd invoke KYC, presumably, is if you were either a fintech offering services that require KYC or a user of that. Again, that's not our business. That is a module, effectively, that if you want to use one of these services, you need to agree with that, and it matches up your publicly broadcasted contract surface, and those match, and those are now enforceable. But that's not something that we need to deal with because we're not a fintech.
Right. Just to reiterate, when two contracts match, that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing business together. There still needs to be an acceptance and invitation.
That's right.
Handshake. Right.
That's right.
Okay.
And what I was saying earlier about service-oriented architecture, or SOAP, as Tom Craig added. You advertise, I've got these contracts, I'm willing to do business on these contracts, you've got these contracts, I'm willing to do that. Then there's a matching. As you would with a SOAP, it still requires you to say, okay, right, I would like to do business now. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm happy to do the business because...
Just explain SOAP, please.
Service-oriented, this is where you put up a service and you advertise to the world. If you want to use this service, let's say if it's, I don't know, a GPS service or whatever, you want to use the service, here's the parameters by which we advertise that. It's a bit like an API, but we're kind of rolling the API into the legal part. So if this was an API call, you need a well-formed JSON, you need to send that off, you need a key, you need, to have previously registered, that's all cool. What we're adding onto that is you also need to sign saying that you're happy to be held by this contract, the DPL, or whatever modules are required. As soon as you do that, then you're good to go, but you still need that handshake backwards and forwards saying, I'd like to do business with you. It's like, yeah, cool. And that turns up in the inbox. And if you both agree, you both check. You can be sure, it's a shorthand, you can both be sure, because of the structure of it, that if they're both signatories to the DPL in the simple case, they're both signatories to the same formulation of the DPL, and they're both advertising that they're happy to do business using the DPL.
Right. So in a smart contract analogy, there should be two smart contracts that both make external calls to each other, but they happen to be able to pick up and talk to each other. But the users at the interface level would still have to click accept the call. Like, if I'm ringing.
Right. Yeah. Although it's, I guess it's moot about whether we should allow inside the DRM code, allow a kind of automatic acceptance. Perhaps that's useful. I don't know. That'd be one for Tom to say. But certainly there needs to be, if it's an automatic acceptance, essentially you're accepting in advance, but it's still an acceptance, right? You're saying, yeah, I'm happy for anyone to arrive.
Would be somebody who is doing business, like a website, for instance. If there's a website on the Dreamcatcher App Store, if you will, and people want to purchase the app or do something with the app, and then that would be an automatic acceptance on the vendor's part.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Purchase, they would go back and say, the call would go back and say, hey, I'm this person wants to buy something, and you go, okay, that's fine, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Or a similar analogy, which raises an interesting example, is affiliates. So some affiliate providers, publishers will look through a list of affiliates. The affiliates will say, if you want to advertise us, crack on. We don't need acceptance. We'll immediately accept you. That's great. If the owner of that affiliate says, well, actually, I really want to know what kind of website you're running before you run your affiliates on your website, then there's a checking piece, and that's a handshake. But in both cases, a handshake, whether it's automated or not. If it's automated, it's a prior decision by the advertiser that they'll accept all comers. If it's not automated, then that's fine. It's a request and acceptance. That makes sense?
Yep.
Cool. I'm sometimes a bit off with the analogies, so I always want to check. Okay, good. Right. Moving down. How much time do you have? It's now 8:51 my time.
9:51.
21:51 your time, isn't it?
About
That threw me because I've got
44
two
minutes or
clocks.
so?
I've got New Zealand time and I've got Scotland time in the background here. And I was cleaning up and I've actually reversed them, so it threw me a second. Right, I've removed the licensor from page 3. I'll look through later on and see what there will be ripples down here that our tightening of the language will require. I've also added, so under asset, I realized we were talking about assets, and okay, let me order this properly. It's just out of order. Right, I'm talking about intellectual property rights on page 6, which is why assets came up, and I've defined assets further up. So as I was scrolling down, it's in the wrong order. It's the right order in the doc. So this is
going to put a comment here that we need to actually spell out what DRM is somewhere. So
yes, we've got a stub, I think, for the DRM. Haven't I done that? I thought I did that.
So I just put a comment here that says what you just got to put your language so somewhere it says what our version of DRM means.
Oh right. Well, that's interesting because I've highlighted system provided by the sum of all Dreamcatcher instances. That's what my definition is, but is that sufficient?
What's the acronym?
Oh, right, DRM, Dreamcatcher. You did mention... I know, we're rubbish at naming things.
Because I was thinking Dreamcatcher resource management or something. I wasn't sure what DRM meant.
Or digital rights management and so on. I think you mentioned that 3 calls ago, saying we've got a bit of an space clash. I haven't come up with a new one, but does that definition is that definition coherent as far as you're concerned? Just the one I highlighted.
System provided by the sum of all Dreamcatcher instances. We mean all. Even
all.
People who spun a node off in the middle of Alaska, right?
Yep.
As long as that node is on the internet, we're still communicating with it.
Yeah.
In some way.
Similar to spinning up an Apache server and putting a website up. We talk about the web. It's a similar kind of thing. Anything attached to the web, by definition, is part of the web, and the web is the combination of all websites. You mentioned mainnet a couple of times. What do you mean by mainnet?
Well, I was going to ask Tom this at some point, but there's always the mainnet, which is the backbone of the protocol, and then there's always some test net somewhere where people can do testing of their ideas or whatnot that aren't going to interfere with the mainnet.
Also,
so if I were to
mainnet is basically not sandbox kind of thing.
Correct. Right. Mainnet is the live version of the protocol. Like, let's say Tom was doing some upgrades, and you would have to do some testing for those upgrades. That would not be mainnet until those upgrades went live, right?
Yeah. Now, this is an interesting one. I'm not sure that concept transfers well over to the Dreamcatcher. So, again, by the analogy of the websites, if you were to spin up a staging site, you could have that staging site on a laptop with a local address. That's still an instance. It doesn't add to the DRM because it's not there's no way for that local staging site on your laptop to interact with the World Wide Web. Nobody can address it. So it's more as soon as it's available on, or at least hypothetically available on a common addressing space. That's the DRM. So your testnet there would be any sandbox that you download, spin up Dreamcatcher. You can do anything you want with it, so long as there's no connection to the outside world. You can do anything else. And if again with a website, if you've got on a local IP running on a local server, there's no address space route from anyone else to find out what you're doing there. So effectively, that's a testnet. Have I answered your question, or have I addressed part of your question? Because I think there's probably something more there.
Yeah, I think there's something more that I think I'll have to talk to Tom about it at some point.
Okay. I
understand what you're saying, though. I got what you're saying.
Yeah, it's an addressing space. The DRM is effectively a common addressing space that people come into. And as soon as you're on that common addressing space, there's no center, but people can interact through it. And that's the DRM. And the DRM, the only common part of it is everyone agrees on the API and the automation provided by the code. Actually, that's not entirely true as well, because it's open source, so people could change it. The only thing that they agree with is the common interface, the Dreamcatcher protocol. So the DRM is the total collection of instances that interact through a Dreamcatcher protocol. Because being open source, you could change comments and so on, and we wouldn't know about it. There's no way you could know about it. I've just made it muddier, haven't I?
No. And again, it was just one of my questions that would, especially for Tom, like, was he noodling around with testnet situations and resource management and that kind of stuff that I just haven't gotten into the weeds yet. So. Oh, sure,
yeah. There's actually a testbed already built that you can actually use. Now, there's nothing else to address with, and so that's can only ever be a testbed. But even when there's other addressable instances, all you have to do is not address anything else, and then you have a testbed or a testnet.
I still think we're going to have to get around the language of the library versus what's being worked on. Like, so let's say Tom and about 1,000 other software engineers are working on the protocol and making cumulative changes to it and versioning it. That possibly can't all be live at the same time. That just would be a shit show.
Oh,
so
sorry.
There has to be some sort of release.
Do I understand? You're talking about version control of releases, or I thought you were talking about
version, release control, and other things about the actual protocol itself.
So
okay.
This again language. So by testnet, let me check what my thinking is here. By testnet, what I'm thinking is you've got a valid and latest stable release, and you're writing an application or a service using that in order to then in the future make it available to the wider address space. Is that what you're meaning by testnet?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I have to be able to have interaction with a version of the protocol that may or may not be live, but I have to be able to test my APIs and make sure everything's functioning properly. Yeah. But it's not ready yet for prime time. And also for the actual version of Dreamcatcher itself, would have to have its own release cycle, versioning history, and when it goes live, and what those dates are, and the announcements. And so that would be the mainnet announcement, right? That would be like, hey, there's a protocol upgrade happening on July 32nd. All right, so we're hard forking this, and
I think understand. Yeah,
hard fork on. So that's what I mean by mainnet.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So the mainnet is actually they've released, let's say, the stable version that we want everyone to use. We can't guarantee that everyone's going to be using it because we can't force anything, we can't push anything. However, what we want to place is a reference.
If we use this language, you're saying this is the mainnet goes live with this version, people would more likely to grab on to that version, the next version.
Right.
Then if Tom, Dick, and Harry Company Inc. did their own versioning and said, no, this is the real mainnet over here. Like, well, how do we argue this? We don't so
right.
It has to come through our GitHub repository. It has to come through that repository. It has to be through those documentation and specifications. It has to be here. or it's not. I mean,
what we'll suggest is we spin this off to a side thing, because really what we're getting into the versioning. So what you've described as where does Dreamcatcher create the next version and make sure it's happy before pushing it out. That again, that's simply a bunch of Dreamcatcher instances which are using the latest code, which is non-addressable back from the address space that everyone else is using. So it's like a sandbox. Then the push out of versioning. And the kind of the backward compatibility of the versioning, of course, because we can't guarantee that everyone's going to do that. That's exactly the same as someone pulling down a set of code and writing their own app on their laptop, and then when they're happy, they make the address space available to everyone else. But what I don't want to do is to overstep the marker there, because I think there's something there's a substrate questions that you're going to have, and that needs to be with Tom. But that's how I see that. So we're really talking about versioning, where's the sandbox, where's the test net, as you say, that tests the Dreamcatcher next version, version N+1. Where's the sandbox that you can test your own apps, and what does push mean? And I'm saying push means actually make it addressably available to other people on the Dreamcatcher. And the DRM, which is the original question, is what's the definition of the DRM, which is like the common addressable space of instances that both advertise and access the addresses of other instances, and therefore can interact them so long as they agree with the API. And Tom, if you're listening, sitting there with wee Harry, please feel free to ping over later on if I've gone wildly off there. But I think that's a summary of it. But what I'd say is let's put that off to one side, because what I don't want to do is spend lots of time on that, and actually, because that's a substrate thing.
Just for Tom, real quick. Hey, Tom, I need to know where the GitHub repository is so I can update the credentials for the login, and also hopefully there's a specification of the Dreamcatcher sitting there already. If not, then we need to start looking at creating it.
Specification? Good God, man.
What? I come shoot with full barrels, man. Like, I don't play around, dude.
What is the specification of which you speak?
Don't say that to me, man. Don't say that.
There's a huge body of support.
No, inline code comments do not count. All right.
Oh, well, I guarantee you when Tom talks to you about that, saying the specification is the code.
No.
All right, I'll leave you to argue that one out. Right, what time is it?
The code is just that. It's code.
Yeah.
Most people in the world don't even read it.
I'm not getting into this argument.
That's why they call it code, man.
Okay, so I've got about 10 minutes left, so let's see how far we get down. Right, let's see. So that whole segue into asset and there into DRM was from intellectual property rights. So I'm now on page 6, and you will not have had a chance to read this because I did this earlier this morning. So you might want to cast your eye over that. And
so intellectual property rights, this whole paragraph?
Correct.
Or section?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see if that's coherent with your view.
Tomorrow. So I'll be listening to this conversation you guys had too on Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday morning my time, evening Tom's time.
All right. Yeah, and then I'll also read through your IPR stuff.
Yeah. The Saturday morning one, actually, you could probably short circuit. If you've not listened to it already, you could probably short circuit, because that was a summary that we had at the top of the call today.
Okay.
That's when we were hacking out, saying, why do we think we're thinking about different things here? And actually turned out we weren't, but there was those 2 substantial points, but the rest was terminology.
Okay.
So yeah. On the IPR stuff, I don't know if you want to spend a couple of minutes now, read through that, and any comments on it. But I've been working through this. Sorry, it's a very Scottish term. Worrying over just means working through. Working through this and updating it, so it should be coherent and correct.
No transfer of IP rights. What do we mean by that? No transfer.
Right. This is the point I made. I think 4 calls ago, probably possibly our second call. When you're talking about how do we were talking about attribution and contribution. So the contribution is the record of it, and the attribution is the royalties. And what does that mean? And can you sell that on? And the answer is yes, you can. But in order to sell it on, you need the chain of evidence of the ownership right back to the original creator. So the intention of this, and the wording might not be right. The intention of this is if you create something that is yours, you've got an asset. As much as you've got, there's a phone here, and I can sell that phone, and sell that phone and cell phone. And at any point, as anyone says, "Have you stolen this phone?" you should be able to trace it back to the original person who actually did it. So the transfer of IP rights are not the same as the selling of the royalties due to that and the ability to sell on those rights. So if I was to write a song, that song is always going to be attributed to me. I'm always going to have the IP rights to that. However, I can sell those rights on to another beneficial owner who then get any money coming towards it. And they can sell it on, and they bundle it, and they can do anything they want with it. If I sell it on, that's fine. So NFTs are real assets that you can actually sell. That's the intention. The wording might be not right. And I welcome anything you can do to tighten up.
Yeah, no transfer of IP rights is going to be problematic for a lawyer. So
I guess what I focus you on, maybe your main part, is that last part without permission. So there's no.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I think maybe the term rights isn't really the right term. I think maybe you're thinking ownership.
Mm-hmm.
No transfer of IP ownership without permission. That would be the entire sentence, right? Well, I mean, other sans the middle, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, okay. That works for me because this I've just highlighted that no transfer of IP rights. What they're saying is there's nothing implied in any contract that implies that IP rights are transferred and therefore ownership of the NFT is transferred without explicit permission of the person who generated it or the owner, the current owner. So there's nothing implied. For example, if you had an employment contract and you wrote, the next best novel, many employment contracts would say, well, that's ours, even though actually what they're doing is shoveling shit, isn't it? So there's no implied transfer of IP rights without permission.
But what I'm saying is that the term rights and ownership are two very, very different things in legal language.
Okay, all right.
So I can have the IP rights, but not have the ownership. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I don't actually. This is interesting because I assume those are the same.
So think of it like a music career, like your buddies. All right, they have a music career. They go to a studio. They record the studio. The studio might have the ownership of the master, but the IP rights might go to the artist. You know what I mean?
No, I still don't understand. So ownership for me is the right to exploit. And rights are the right to exploit by, there's ownership to me is the right to have to exploit this asset in any way that you see fit and transfer that ownership onto someone else. So I see all them as synonymous, but you're saying they're different, which is really interesting.
Yeah, they're because if I'm the owner of an NFT, but then I give somebody rights to maybe get a cut of the royalties, that's not the same as ownership. I mean, maybe a partial ownership or maybe a shared ownership or something else, but it's not ownership.
Yes, okay.
Rights to the royalty may not be you may not even be the owner, but you still might have rights to the royalty by some other contract. Like I could sell the rights to my royalties to a venture capital company. Like I could if let's say I'm an investment firm and I go around and I buy everybody's rights to their IP, but not their ownership, just the rights, and I bundle it together into some sort of shares company and go, look, this is IP Shares Inc. And we have a recurring revenue stream from by buying the rights from IP owners and bundling that into a package where you get a monthly check. People do that already. That happens.
This is beautiful. Oh, I love these moments. Interesting enough. So that description is far more subtle than the one I had in my head, and the one I had in my head is the one I've been using all my life. I love moments like this when I'm wrong. Okay, so if I reflect back what you're saying, ownership is the totality of all possible rights through perpetuity, of which you can hive off certain rights to others and sell those as a separate asset. Have I got that right?
That's right. That's right. That's correct.
Brilliant.
Or sell the ownership outright.
I love it when I. Yeah, you know what? For the my career of the last 30 years, I've been actually just conflating those two. Because generally speaking, rights are sold in chunks. So what you're saying is actually take the latte.
I'll give you one. Okay, I have patents to my name.
Uh-huh.
I'm the patent holder. I own the patent, but I do not have the rights to it.
Right. Okay.
Because
So
I sold the rights to a company for $1.
this maps really well. Okay. So if you're thinking Dreamcatcher terminology, ownership is asserted by the first person that creates an asset of any kind, and it can be a service, it can be creating code or whatever, creates an asset.
Yep.
They're the owners because they can prove on the chain that the first time that the chain knew about this is when they went and they put that on and they created this thing.
That's right.
And so that's an asset.
Right. That's right.
The rights can be sliced up. Interesting enough, can be sliced up and diced by any current. What's a rights owner called? Because I don't want to use owner again. It's like a rights exploiter. So say we said
a licensee. It would be a rights licensee of some type.
Is it licensee? So say if I recorded me singing Merry Christmas and put that on the chain, and then I said, right, I'm going to sell rights to anyone who broadcasts this in China, and separately the rights for Australia, and separately the rights for US. And the guy who bought the rights then sold their package.
That's a license.
So they're packaged, and it's like, we're only going to be broadcasting this in North Dakota, and I'll sell at a much cheaper rate in California. Okay, so there's slicing of rights. So the owner in this case is the person who can prove that they've got the chain ID and the key of the NFT that was originally created. All right. Yeah, no, it's good. That's much tighter. Much tighter. Okay, so if I were to hazard a rewrite of this, and thank you very much. I love it. I love it when I learn something new and realize I've been wrong for all these years. And nobody's ever picked me up for it, probably because they don't know how. And I'm not a lawyer. And it's I've never been sued.
And neither am I, man. I just deal with a lot of it.
Well, thank you. So it's like when you get a disease, suddenly you become an expert in that disease. I've never been sued over rights, so I've just been going with the broad thing. Okay, so there is ownership of IP is retained by the originally it was wrong. That's wrong. Okay, so this is in terms of what the Dreamcatcher thinks. If you're the one who originally committed to the chain, whether that's evidence on the chain or on the DRM rather, more specifically, that you're asserting the ability to sell rights in that ownership, and that ownership is always there, and it should be traced all the way back. And so you cannot, and this is an important thing. So this is the point where there's nothing in any contract inside of the DRM between individuals on projects that can revoke your rights. If you're both DPL owners, you just say, if you create something, that's your ownership rights. Now you do have rights. You do have the right to sell. Okay, so cannot be sold, assigned, licensed, rented, distributed, either direct or indirect commercial
advantage. You have the right to sell, you have the right to lease.
Yeah, without permission. That's the important thing. Yeah. And then the lawful owner of those rights can resell, bundle, do whatever they want inside of the confines of their rights. Where would that? User rights. No transfer of IP rights. All IP rights. Right. Okay. I think we covered that. I can get rid of that. Oops. Distribution right conveyed to the user of the asset does not include the right to make further copies. Right. Okay. So what I was trying to do here, the intention of this one, is you can sell usage rights without having to sell rights. So if I were the owner and I sell the rights to use this software in the US, someone else can sell those usage rights to a user, and that doesn't confer any kind of transfer of overall royalties. I don't know what the wording is. This is very much a cut and paste from another contract, but that's the intention of that.
It still sounds like a lease to me. Leasing.
Well, so,
it's asset leasing, right? So
yeah. So here's an analogy. So I write a zip program. I sell the rights to someone in the US. That person in the US sells that on to end users with a license. The end users have no rights to anything beyond the usage of that zip program. When they click saying, "Yeah, I'm going to spend $4.99, get the zip program," I'm not actually buying the zip program. I'm just buying the rights to use it. You're quiet, but I've learned to read quiet is thinking, so that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah. And the rest is this is actually quite vanilla. This is what you'd expect. And is intended to mirror, say, the music industry, as we said 3 calls ago, or as you pointed out.
Well, it's probably going to a lot because that's where the copyright world lives at the moment, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Disney has done a number on the copyright law of the world, so I mean, we're all in Disney's copyright pocket now. I mean, they keep pushing the damn date because they can keep control of Mickey to their fucking last breath. They're definitely afraid of losing control of Mickey. You don't even understand. Like there's a war room just to make sure they can try and keep Mickey's control. Like how do we change it? How do we do this? They're freaking out over there at Disney. That's why they changed the law. That's why they lobbied so hard to get it.
Oh, they've got deep pockets, and they lobby like a banshee around Washington for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was like what? It was 50 years after the artist died. Now it's 80. Just so that Mickey Mouse could get a couple more years out of Disneyland.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, that poor mouse. Okay, right. So what we'll do is, I'm broadly. That was a really useful distinction that you raised between ownership and rights. I'll rewrite this part today for our next call. I'm going to have to bounce. Actually, I'm real close to the next thing I need to do. A couple of minutes I've got.
I got to go anyway, so that's fine.
Cool. When are you next available?
2 more days? Yeah. So today's Monday, so Wednesday?
Wednesday's good. Okay. Yep. Cool. And what a lot of this actually, I'm going to give a general review of this one because I think a lot of this stuff might change. So what I'll do is I'll ping you when I've gone through and saying, okay, it's worthy to review. The reason is...
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, so if you ping me, if you feel like you're free conversation, if you feel like you're got something to look at, I'll look at it then.
Yeah, cool. Let's do that. Otherwise, Wednesday, 8 a.m., 2100 your time. And we'll carry this on. And I'm rather hoping this live stream actually worked and we haven't lost it on. We'll see.
I got to record on my end too, so.
All right, mate.
I'll upload it. All right.
Have a good one. Enjoy the world of auditing smart contracts.
Oh, yeah, dude. You know what? I love it. I'm all about that smart contract auditing.
You got a challenge on your hand there. It's brilliant. If you can crack that, you're golden for the rest of your life, basically.
Well, I brought it up. I brought it up in the smart contract Discord. I think someone's head just exploded. They're like, "Huh? No, what?" So,
Yeah.
I got the wheels turning, so
And for your next trick, what, you're going to audit the Mandelbrot set or something?
I'll audit it all.
All right.
I'm gonna audit Tom next, so we'll see.
Oh my God, no, I wouldn't go there.
Here it comes, Tom.
All right. See you later. Bye, Tom, if you're watching.
All right.
See you later.
Yeah, bye, Tom, if you're watching.
See you.